He picked her up, a woman he had never met, out of a frozen bus stop at midnight, loaded her wheelchair into the back of his beat-up truck, and drove her home to his apartment where his sick daughter was waiting. No questions, no conditions, just go. But what Garrett Hail did not know was that the woman shivering in that wheelchair had once signed paychecks for over 400 employees. And what she didn't know was that accepting his help that night would cost her everything she thought she'd already lost. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to be here for all 5 parts of this one. The night Garrett Hail's life changed forever started the same way every other night did, with him running late. He was always running late. Late to pick up Ren from school, late to pay the electric bill, late to his own grief if he was being honest with himself. Ever since Dana left, not died, not disappeared, but left, which somehow felt worse. Garrett had been chasing a version of his own life that kept moving just a few steps ahead of him, no matter how fast he walked. He pulled his jacket tighter as he moved through the cold. It was the kind of January night that didn't ask permission. It just reached right through whatever you were wearing and reminded you that it owned you. His breath came out in white clouds. His boots hit the sidewalk in a rhythm that had become muscle memory over 3 years of walking this same route from the late shift at Dunmore Hardware. He was thinking about Ren. She'd been running a fever since that morning, 102. Mrs. Alcott from downstairs had agreed to stay with her until Garrett got home. But Mrs. Alcott was 74 years old and went to bed at 9. And Garrett's watch read 11:47. He had already texted twice. No response. Either the old woman was asleep or her phone had died again. Both were entirely possible. He walked faster. The bus stop at the corner of Leonard and Fifth wasn't something he ever paid attention to. It was just a landmark, a green metal bench, a flickering overhead light, a plastic shelter with a cracked panel that the city had never bothered to fix. He passed it every night. He never stopped. He almost didn't stop that night either. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the wheelchair. It was facing the wrong direction, sideways to the bench, like whoever was in it had been trying to move and couldn't. Maybe it was the way the figure in it was sitting. Not relaxed, not waiting, but collapsed, arms drawn in, head tilted to one side, like a person who had stopped fighting something a while back and hadn't quite decided what came next. Or maybe it was just the sound. It was so quiet that Garrett almost missed it. A low, controlled exhale, not a cry, not a moan, but the specific sound of someone working very hard not to make a sound. He had heard that sound before. He had made that sound before, on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., when Ren was asleep and he finally let himself feel something. He stopped walking. The woman in the wheelchair didn't look up. She was young, or at least younger than him, probably late 20s or early 30s, with dark hair pulled back into a bun that had mostly come loose. She had a thin blanket across her lap that had slid down on one side. Her hands were bare. She was gripping the wheels of her chair so tightly that her knuckles had gone white, and she was staring at the ground with the focused, unblinking look of someone who was refusing to acknowledge that they were in trouble. Garrett stood there for a second. He knew better. He lived in a city. He'd been approached enough times, and he'd approached enough times, and he knew how these things usually went. Either the person needed money, or they were in a situation that was more complicated than one tired man with $12 in his wallet and a sick kid at home could solve. But she hadn't looked at him yet. She didn't know he was there, and for some reason, that made it worse. "Hey," he said. She flinched. Her whole body tightened. Her chin snapped up, and her eyes found him immediately. Dark eyes, sharp eyes, the kind that had been scanning exits since long before tonight. And she pulled the blanket back up over her lap with one quick, defensive motion. "I'm fine," she said. "Okay," Garrett said. He didn't move. She looked at him the way people look at someone who is not behaving according to script. He had said, "Okay." He was supposed to nod and walk away. That was the transaction. She had refused the help. He accepted the refusal. Everybody went home. He didn't go home. "I wasn't going to offer anything," he said. "I was just... You looked cold." "I am cold." Her voice was flat, like she was reporting a weather condition. "That's not your problem." "No," Garrett agreed. "It's not." A pause. Wind moved through the gap in the plastic shelter and pushed a crumpled receipt across the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. He watched her jaw work, like she was chewing on whether to tell the truth or just say something that would make him leave. "Since yesterday morning," she finally said. Garrett looked at her. He looked at the thin blanket. He looked at her bare hands. "Yesterday morning," he said. It wasn't a question. It was the specific tone of a man who is doing math in his head and doesn't like what he's coming up with. "There was a shelter," she said, and her voice had changed slightly, harder now, but with a crack in it that she was working to close. "They said they had a room, accessible. They had the ramp marked on their website." She paused. "The ramp was broken, had been broken for 6 months. They said maybe next week." "So you came out here?" "I left. There's a difference." She said it like the distinction mattered enormously, like holding on to it was the thing keeping the rest of her together. Garrett nodded slowly. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and looked at the time. 11:51. Wren was home. Mrs. Alcott was probably asleep in the armchair. The apartment was warm. Not warm. The radiator in the bedroom made a sound like a dying animal, and the kitchen window didn't quite close all the way. But warm enough. Warm enough that it was obscene to be standing outside with a woman who had been sitting in a broken bus shelter since yesterday morning in the middle of January. "My name's Garrett," he said. She looked at him like she was waiting for the second part of that sentence, the part where he explained what he wanted. "That's it," he said. "That's the whole thing. My name's Garrett." Another pause. "Sylvia," she said, very quietly. "Okay, Sylvia." He put his phone back in his pocket. "I live about 4 blocks from here. I've got a couch. It pulls out, actually, and the mattress is not terrible. I've got a daughter who's sick and probably asleep, and a neighbor who fell asleep on my armchair, which, honestly, is fine. She can stay there. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not—" He stopped, ran a hand across his face. "I know how this sounds. I know you've got every reason not to trust some random guy who walked up to you at midnight." "You have no idea what reasons I have," she said. "You're right," he said. "I don't." She was quiet. "I'm just saying," he continued, "you've been outside since yesterday. That's a long time, and it's 12 degrees. And I walk this way every night, and I'm going home right now, and I've got a pull-out couch." He shrugged. "That's all I've got. You don't have to come. I'm not going to stand here and beg you." Sylvia looked at him. He watched her face go through something. A series of calculations that he couldn't fully follow. Something behind her eyes that was more complicated than just trust or mistrust. It was the look of someone weighing options that had already been narrowed down so many times that this one, this strange, improbable midnight option, standing in a hardware store jacket, was starting to look less impossible than it had 60 seconds ago. Your couch, she said. Pull out. It's a pull-out couch. Does your building have a ramp? He thought. There's a step at the front door, maybe 3 inches. But there's a side entrance by the parking lot. It's flat, I think. I've never checked, but I think it's flat. You think it's flat. I will go check right now before we go anywhere, and if it's not, I will figure out something else. She looked at him for a long time. If you try anything, I won't. I have a phone. Good. And I swear to God, I will. I know, Garrett said. You don't have to tell me. I believe you. Something shifted in her face. Not warmth exactly. Not relief. Something more like the slow, reluctant release of a fist that had been clenched for a very long time. Okay, she said. The side entrance was flat. Garrett had jogged ahead to check while Sylvia waited, and by the time he came back, she had managed to pull her blanket tighter and push her chair a few feet in the direction of the building. Not because she needed help getting there, she made that very clear, but because the sooner she was out of the cold, the better. He held the door. That was it. He didn't grab the chair. He didn't reach for the handles. He'd started to, instinctively, and she had said, "Don't," in a voice that wasn't angry, but was absolute. And so he just held the door and let her pass. The elevator was small. They stood in it without speaking. He watched her look at the buttons. 3rd floor. Her eyes moved to the door, to the ceiling, to her own hands. He got the sense that she was cataloging everything. Exits, surfaces, distance, angles. The way someone does when they've learned that safety is something you have to calculate yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. How long have you been in the city? He asked, just to fill the quiet. 8 months. Where were you before? Portland. He nodded. He didn't push. The elevator opened. The apartment was number 312. Garrett unlocked it as quietly as he could, pushed the door open, and immediately heard Mrs. Alcott's breathing. Slow, deep, the unmistakable sound of a 74-year-old woman, completely unconscious in an armchair. He exhaled. He moved to the bedroom door and cracked it open. Wren was asleep, her small face flushed but still, one arm thrown over the edge of the bed, with the particular abandon of a child who trusted completely that the world would hold still while she was unconscious. He pulled the door almost closed. When he came back to the living room, Sylvia was stopped just inside the entrance, looking at the space. It was modest. He was past the age of being embarrassed about that, mostly. But he saw it through her eyes for a moment. The bookshelf with the uneven shelves that he kept meaning to fix. The stack of Wren's drawings on the coffee table. The refrigerator covered in magnets from every state fair and roadside attraction he and Wren had hit in 3 summers of driving around, trying to become the kind of father who took his daughter to state fairs. Sylvia's face was unreadable. "Bathroom's through there," he said quietly. "I'll pull out the couch. There's extra blankets in the closet. I don't need you to—" "I know," he said. "I'll just leave them on the chair." He went to work. She went to the bathroom. He had the couch pulled out and the sheets on by the time she came back, and he left the extra blankets folded on the chair exactly as he'd said, and then he went to the kitchen. "You want something?" he called, keeping his voice low. "I've got—" He opened the fridge. "Leftover chili, which is actually pretty good, and some cheese, and I think there's bread. And I've got instant soup if—" "Chili is fine." He heated it up, put it in a bowl, put the bowl on the coffee table without ceremony, and sat down across from her in the armchair. The other armchair, across the room, far enough away that there was no possibility of it reading as anything other than simple, tired coexistence. She ate. He watched her try not to let him see how hungry she was. The way she kept her movements deliberate, her pace controlled, when everything about the angle of her body said she wanted to finish that bowl in 30 seconds flat. He didn't say anything. He looked at the stack of Wren's drawings. He looked at the ceiling. "Thank you," Sylvia said. "Sure." The wind was still going outside. The radiator made its sound. Mrs. Alcott shifted in her sleep. "Why are you doing this?" Sylvia said. Garrett looked at her. "Doing what?" "This." She gestured, a small, controlled movement that somehow encompassed the chili, the pull-out couch, the blankets on the chair, all of it. "You don't know me." "No." "Most people walk past." "Yeah, I know." "So why didn't you?" He thought about it for a second. Not the easy answer, the real one. "I walked past someone once," he said. "A long time ago. A guy sitting outside a convenience store, middle of February. I was in a hurry. I told myself somebody else would stop. Somebody better equipped, somebody with more time, somebody who knew what to do." He paused. "Nobody stopped. I don't know what happened to him. Probably nothing. Probably he was fine. But I've been thinking about it for 15 years. Sylvia was quiet. "That doesn't really answer your question," he said. "Yeah, it does," she said. Wren found her in the morning. That was something Garrett hadn't fully accounted for. The fact that his 8-year-old daughter woke up before him, every single morning, regardless of fever, regardless of the laws of physics, regardless of all reason. She was like a rooster with opinions. He heard the footsteps in the hallway. He heard them stop. He came out of the bedroom at a speed that was just short of a run and found Wren standing in the doorway to the living room, still in her Paw Patrol pajamas, staring at Sylvia with the specific, unblinking attention of a child who has found something genuinely interesting. Sylvia had just woken up. She was sitting upright in the pull-out bed, her hair down now, looking at Wren with an expression that Garrett couldn't quite read. Not alarmed, exactly. More like someone who had just realized that one of the variables they'd failed to account for was now standing 3 feet away and staring. "Hi," Wren said. "Hi," said Sylvia. "Is that a wheelchair?" "Wren," Garrett said. "It's okay," Sylvia said. She looked at Wren. "Yeah, it is." "Cool," said Wren. And that was apparently the end of her analysis, because she turned around and walked toward the kitchen. "Dad, I want eggs." "You've got a fever." "I feel better." "You have 102. "I feel 101. She had already opened the refrigerator. "We have eggs and we have cheese. That's an omelet situation, Dad. That's just math." Garrett looked at Sylvia. Sylvia looked at him. For a fraction of a second, a single, unexpected fraction of a second, something crossed her face that was almost a smile. "She's not wrong about the math," Sylvia said. He made eggs. He called work that morning. Steve at Dunmore Hardware was not what anyone would describe as understanding. But he was practical, and when Garrett said, "family situation," Steve said, "not before Thursday," and that was the end of it. 3 days. Garrett had 3 days. He wasn't sure what he planned to do with 3 days. He hadn't thought that far. He never thought that far. He came back to the living room while Wren was parked in front of cartoons, still in her pajamas, blanket pulled up to her chin, looking significantly more recovered than she had any right to, given she'd been burning up 12 hours ago. Sylvia had moved her chair to the window. She had her phone in her lap, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking outside. Garrett sat down on the couch. "I need to find a shelter," she said. She said it like she was reading off a checklist. No emotion, just logistics. I know what the city has." Her voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it. Something that had been pressed down until it was very flat and very dense. "I've called 17 places in 8 months. I know the wait times. I know the accessibility ratings. I know which ones say they're accessible and which ones actually are. I have a system." "Okay," Garrett said. "I'm not asking for help," she said. "I'm just saying, I have a plan. I just need a day or two to make some calls, and then I'll be out of your way." "Sylvia," he kept his voice even, "you don't have to be out of my way." She turned from the window and looked at him directly for the first time that morning. Those sharp, dark eyes, the ones that had been scanning exits since before he met her. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "No," he agreed. "I'm not some—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "I'm not a project. I didn't say you were. People think—" She stopped again, looked at her hands. When she looked back up, something in her face had shifted. Not softened exactly, but changed, like a door that had been pushed from the other side. "People think because I'm in this chair that I need to be fixed, or saved, or—" She made a sound that was almost a laugh, except it wasn't. "I had a company. Did you know that? Before all this. I had a company, and I had 47 employees, and I had an apartment with a view of the river, and a car, and a—" She stopped, closed her eyes for a moment, opened them. "I'm not a charity case." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I know you're not," he said. "You don't, though." "Sylvia." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I didn't help you last night because I thought you needed saving. I helped you last night because it was 12 degrees and you were going to freeze to death at a bus stop. That's it. That's the whole thing." She watched him. "A company," he said. "A beat." "Crane Dynamics," she said. And the way she said it, the name came out of her differently than anything else she'd said, like it was printed in a different font inside her, heavier, more permanent. "Construction tech. We were developing adaptive equipment for building sites, modular systems that could be assembled without heavy machinery." She paused. "We had 3 patents. We had a major partnership lined up with a firm in Seattle. We were—" She stopped. "We were good." "What happened?" She looked at him. He thought she wasn't going to answer. She pressed her lips together, looked back at the window, looked back at him. "A site visit," she said. 14 months ago. I was doing an inspection with our lead engineer, Marcus. His name was Marcus. He's been with the company since the beginning. And there was a section of scaffolding that was supposed to have been cleared, but hadn't. And something gave way." She delivered this completely without expression, the specific tonelessness of someone who has told this story enough times that the words have been worn smooth. "Marcus broke his arm. I broke my spine. L1 through L3. I've been in the chair since." Garrett didn't say anything. He sat with it. "The board voted me out 6 weeks after the accident," she continued. Her voice hadn't changed. "They said they needed stable leadership during a critical growth phase. My second in command, a man I hired, a man I mentored, walked me to that meeting himself and voted first." "And your partner?" Garrett said quietly. Sylvia looked at him. Something moved through her eyes. "He left at month 4, she said. He said he couldn't handle watching me like this. Those were his words. Watching me. Like I was something happening to him." From the other room came the sound of cartoon music and Wren's occasional commentary on the plot. A steady, cheerful, oblivious backdrop to everything. Garrett looked at his hands. "Sylvia," he said. "You asked," she said. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just answering the question." "I know," he said. "I'm not giving you sympathy. I'm just sitting here." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she said. Not sharp, not defensive, genuinely asking, in a quieter voice than any she'd used so far. "Because," he said, "I think that's what's required right now. Just sitting here." The cartoons played. The radiator made its sound. Outside the window, the city moved in its indifferent, relentless way. And somewhere in that city, a company called Crane Dynamics was operating without its founder. And somewhere in that city were 47 people who probably didn't know, or had chosen not to ask, whatever happened to the woman who built it. And in apartment 312, on the third floor of a building on Leonard Street, Sylvia Crane sat in her wheelchair by the window, and Garrett Hail sat across from her on his couch. And neither of them said anything for a while, and it was not uncomfortable. It was just quiet. And sometimes, quiet is enough. The next morning came the way mornings always do when something has shifted in your life. Too fast and with too much light. Garrett was up at 6. He'd slept maybe 3 hours. Not because anything had gone wrong, but because his brain kept running back over the night before, picking it apart the way you do when you're not sure if what you did was right or just felt right, and whether there's actually a difference. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen counter and listened to the apartment breathe around him. Wren's soft snoring from behind the bedroom door, the tick and moan of the radiator, and underneath all of it, the occasional quiet shift of wheels on the hardwood floor from the living room. She was already awake. He poured a second mug without thinking about it and brought it out. Sylvia was at the window again. Different angle from yesterday. She'd moved her chair closer to the glass, close enough that her breath was leaving a small cloud against it. She had her phone open to something, but she wasn't reading it. She was watching the street below. He set the mug on the windowsill within reach. He didn't say anything. He went back to the kitchen. A minute passed. "It's good," she called. "Yeah," he said. "It's the only thing I make well." She didn't respond to that, but when he came back out with his own mug, she had her hands wrapped around hers, and something in the line of her shoulders had dropped a fraction of an inch. A tiny, almost invisible amount. The kind of thing most people wouldn't notice. The kind of thing Garrett noticed, because he'd spent 3 years paying attention to the posture of people who were trying not to show what they needed. He sat on the couch. Wren was still asleep. This was the strange, quiet hour before his daughter woke up and turned the volume on the world back to full. "I made some calls last night," Sylvia said. "Yeah? There's a transitional housing program on the east side, St. Catherine's. They have an accessible unit opening up in 3 weeks." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things. Information delivered, no discussion required. "I have an appointment with their intake coordinator on Thursday." 3 weeks is a long time, Garrett said. "I've waited longer." She said it without self-pity, just fact. He looked at his mug. "You can stay here," he said. Silence. "Garrett, I'm not making it a thing," he said. "I'm just saying. Wren's room has enough space. I can move the stuff out of the corner, and it'd be tight, but I'm not staying in your daughter's room." "The living room, then. I don't use the pull-out that much." "You sleep on it." "I sleep on the couch. The pull-out was for guests." He paused. "Which you are." She turned from the window. She had the look of someone whose argument has been slightly outmaneuvered, but hasn't decided to concede yet. "Why are you pushing this?" she said. "Because you've got nowhere to go for 3 weeks, and I've got a pull-out couch." He kept his voice level. "That's the whole math, Sylvia. That's the whole thing. You have a daughter who already asked you about your wheelchair and moved on. She's not going to be traumatized by having someone else in the apartment. That's not what I meant." She turned her mug in her hands. "I meant, you have a life, a routine. A kid who counts on that routine. You don't need a stranger disrupting it. Wren's routine, Garrett said slowly, consists of waking up at 6 a.m. for no reason, demanding breakfast foods that require skill I may or may not have, watching too much television, and asking me approximately 940 questions a day. I think she can accommodate a disruption. Sylvia looked at him for a moment. He couldn't tell if she was amused or frustrated. Maybe both. "You're very stubborn," she said. My ex-wife said the same thing, but she said it with more colorful language. The corner of Sylvia's mouth moved, just barely. He was starting to recognize it as the closest thing to a smile she let herself have. 3 weeks, she said. It wasn't agreement. It was a perimeter being drawn. 3 weeks, he said. From the bedroom came a loud thump, followed by small footsteps, followed by Wren's voice carrying clearly through the wall. "Dad, I feel better. I want pancakes." Sylvia looked toward the bedroom door. Something moved across her face, something quick and complicated that she covered before it fully formed. "How old is she?" Sylvia asked. 8, Garrett said, already standing. Going on 40. "Does she always wake up like that?" "Every single day. Like a fire alarm with opinions." He was moving toward the kitchen. "Pancakes okay with you?" A pause. "Sure," Sylvia said. And something about the way she said it, the single syllable, quiet and a little surprised, like the word had come out before she'd had time to decide whether to let it, told Garrett more than she probably intended. She hadn't been asked that question in a while. What do you want? Is this okay with you? The small, ordinary questions of being inside a life instead of outside it. She'd forgotten what they felt like. He didn't point that out. He just made pancakes. Wren came out of the bedroom in a different pair of pajamas. She had apparently changed in the night for reasons she considered self-evident, and climbed directly onto the couch next to Sylvia's chair, as though this was something she had done 100 times before. Sylvia went very still. "Are you sick?" Wren asked. "No," Sylvia said carefully. "Dad said you were a guest." "I am." "We don't usually have guests." Wren considered this. "We had Uncle Dave once, but he snored." "I'll try not to snore." "Good. It was really bad." Wren pulled her knees up to her chest. "What happened to your legs?" "Wren," Garrett called from the kitchen. "She can ask," Sylvia said. She looked at Wren. "I had an accident. It hurt my spine. My legs don't work the way they used to." Wren nodded slowly, processing. Her face had that look kids get when they're genuinely trying to understand something and not performing understanding for the adults around them. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes," Sylvia said. "Not all the time. My dad hurt his shoulder once, and he didn't complain about it for like a year. And then one day, he couldn't lift his arm, and Mom said he was the most stubborn person she'd ever met." She paused. "But he's not stubborn about other stuff. Just hurt stuff." Sylvia glanced toward the kitchen. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she said. Garrett came out with the pancakes and saw Wren and Sylvia sitting side by side. Wren on the couch, Sylvia in her chair. Wren talking with the relentless, easy confidence of a child who had not yet learned that conversation required negotiation. And he stood there for just a moment longer than he needed to. Just a second. Long enough to notice. He put the plates down and didn't say anything about it. The day passed in pieces. Wren recovered enough to be borderline feral. That specific level of sick kid energy where they're no longer miserable, but also haven't gotten it fully back yet. And the result is a kind of chaotic half-vigor that fills a small apartment very efficiently. She talked. She drew. She informed Sylvia, unprompted, about the complete history of every magnet on the refrigerator, including the one from the Oklahoma State Fair that was shaped like a cowboy boot and that she considered the best one, and the one from a gas station in Nebraska that she considered the worst, but was keeping for historical accuracy. Sylvia listened. She didn't just tolerate it. She actually listened, asking questions at the right moments, holding up her end of the conversation with a precision that suggested she was someone who had once been very good at reading rooms and had not entirely lost the skill. Around 3 in the afternoon, Wren fell asleep on the couch with the television still on, and the apartment went quiet again. Garrett was in the kitchen doing dishes. He heard the wheels on the floor, and then Sylvia appeared in the doorway. "I can," she started. "You don't have to help," he said. "I know I don't have to." Her voice had a slight edge, not hostile, but corrective. "I said I can. That's different." He stepped back from the sink. She moved in beside him without ceremony and picked up the dish towel from the counter. He washed. She dried. The kitchen was small enough that this required a specific kind of quiet coordination, and after a minute of adjusting, him passing things to her left instead of reaching across, it worked. "She asked me where her mom was," Sylvia said. Garrett kept washing. "What did you tell her?" "I said I didn't know. She said—" Sylvia paused. "She said she lives in Denver. She calls on Sundays, but sometimes she forgets." Then she went back to drawing. The water ran. A plate got passed. "How old was she when Dana left?" Sylvia asked. 5. He handed her a mug. "Dana didn't— She's not a bad person. She just wasn't built for the particular life we were living. She tried for a while. Then she stopped trying and left, which is actually more honest than most people manage." He paused. "She does call on Sundays. Usually." "And Wren?" "Wren is—" He stopped. Something shifted in his voice. "Wren is the most resilient person I have ever met in my life, which is wonderful, and also sometimes breaks my heart a little. Because kids shouldn't have to be resilient. They should just get to be kids." Sylvia dried a bowl without speaking. "I know that feeling," she said finally. He didn't ask her to explain it. She was talking about herself, but she was talking about it sideways, the way people do when a feeling is too direct to approach head-on. "Your company," he said carefully. "Crane Dynamics. When it fell apart, did you have people? Family?" "My parents are in Ohio." Her voice stayed even, but her hands moved more carefully around the bowl. "They're good people. They flew out when it happened. Stayed for 2 weeks. My mother wanted me to move back home." She stacked the bowl. "I almost did. I was close. And then one morning I woke up in my childhood bedroom and I could hear my dad downstairs telling someone on the phone that his daughter had been in an accident and she was coming home and she was—" She stopped. "What?" "Taken care of." The 2 words came out with a specific weight. "He said I was going to be taken care of." And I realized that the second I walked back through that door, that was what I would be forever. Taken care of. Not a CEO, not a founder, not the person who built something from nothing in 7 years. Just someone who needed to be taken care of. "So you stayed?" "I stayed." She handed him back the dish towel. "And then I lost the apartment and the car, and the legal fees from the board dispute ate what was left of my savings, and—" She turned her chair slightly, looking at the wall rather than at him. "Here I am, drying dishes in a stranger's kitchen." "Not a stranger," Garrett said. "Not anymore." She looked at him. He wasn't sure where that came from. He hadn't planned to say it. It just came out, the way things do when you stop filtering yourself for half a second. But he didn't take it back. Sylvia looked at him for a long moment, And the thing behind her eyes, that careful, exhausted, constantly calculating thing, shifted just slightly. "No," she said, "not anymore." The evening was easier than Garrett expected. Wren woke up from her nap and immediately resumed the magnet history lecture, which transitioned into a request for dinner, which turned into all three of them at the kitchen table eating pasta because Garrett had somehow accumulated 8 boxes of rotini and needed to use them. It should have felt strange. It didn't. That was the thing he couldn't quite get his head around. How quickly strange had become ordinary. Like his apartment had adjusted its proportions slightly to fit the new configuration of people inside it. But it was later that night, after Wren was asleep, and the dishes were done, and Garrett was on his way to bed, that Sylvia stopped him. "Garrett." He turned. She was at her phone again, but this time she was looking at it. Her face had changed. The careful evenness had cracked just slightly. Not in a way that spilled over, but in a way that you could see. Like a wall with a hairline fracture. You had to know where to look. "What is it?" he said. She looked up. "I got an email," she said, "from Marcus." He took a step back into the room. "Marcus, you're the engineer?" "He was my first hire," she said. "Literally, my first. I hired him out of community college because I saw something. Everyone else wanted to wait for the university pipeline. Wait for people with 4 years and no ideas. Marcus had 2 years and 12 ideas." She paused. "He voted with the board when they pushed me out." "What does the email say?" She held the phone out to him. He read it. It was short, 3 paragraphs. The first one was an apology, but not the kind that asks for forgiveness. The kind that just places something down in front of you and says, "This is what happened, and I am not asking you to be okay with it, but I need you to know." Marcus said he hadn't been able to sleep. He said the company had changed since she left, and not in the direction she'd built it to go. He said the Seattle partnership had collapsed. He said there were layoffs coming. He said, and this was the part Garrett read twice, that he'd heard from someone that she was in the city, and that he was sorry, and that if she ever wanted to talk, he was still at the same number. Garrett handed the phone back. "What are you going to do?" he said. Sylvia put the phone face down on the pull-out mattress. She pressed her palm flat against it. "I don't know," she said. And for the first time since he'd met her, in the cold at the bus stop, in the elevator, at the kitchen table, she sounded like she actually didn't know. Not calculating, not managing, not already 3 steps ahead, just genuinely uncertain. Like the question had reached her in a place she hadn't reinforced. Garrett stood in the doorway for a moment. "You don't have to figure that out tonight," he said. "I know. But you're going to sit here and think about it until 4 in the morning." She almost laughed. Almost. "Probably." "Okay." He leaned against the doorframe. "Then I'll stay up with you for a while. Not to talk about it, just I'll stay up." She looked at him with that expression she kept using on him. The one he was still figuring out the name for. Not quite disbelief. Not quite gratitude. Something that sat between the two. Something that belonged to a person who had been surprised by kindness more than once, and still hadn't found a way to file it. "You have work tomorrow," she said. "I called out," he said. "Remember?" "You called out for me." "I called out because the situation required it." He sat back down on the arm of the couch. "Don't make it weird." She looked at him. "Garrett," she said. "Yeah?" "I had 47 employees." She said it slowly. 47. Most of them younger than me. Half of them I hired personally. And when the board voted me out, do you know how many of them called? He waited. 3, she said. And one of those was Marcus, calling to explain why he'd voted against me, which I'm not sure counts. He didn't say anything. I built something, she said. I built it from nothing. And the moment I couldn't walk through the door the same way I walked through it before, she stopped. Her jaw worked. The world just, she shook her head, decided it was finished with me. The radiator made its sound. The city moved outside. The world is wrong, Garrett said. She looked at him. That's all, he said. That's the whole thing. The world is wrong, and you know it. And somewhere underneath all of this, he gestured vaguely at the space between them, at everything she'd told him, at the phone sitting face down on the mattress. You know you're not finished. That's why you stayed. That's why you didn't go back to Ohio. That's why you're here at midnight, looking at an email instead of just deleting it. Sylvia was very still. You're still Crane Dynamics, he said, even if they took the name. She looked at the phone. She looked at the window. She looked at him. And this time, when something moved across her face, she didn't close it off. She let it stay. It wasn't the smile exactly. It was older than a smile, more complicated. It was the face of someone who had been handed a mirror and was deciding whether to look. That's a nice thing to say, she said. I mean it. I know you do, she said. That's what makes it nice. They stayed up until almost 1, not talking about Marcus, not talking about Crane Dynamics, not talking about the email, talking about other things, Wren's school, and the time Garrett had tried to build a bookshelf from scratch, and it had leaned exactly 17 degrees to the left, and he'd called it artistic, and a road trip he and Wren had taken to Tennessee, where they'd both eaten hot chicken and both immediately regretted it. Small things, real things, the kind of things that fill up a life when you're not looking. And when Garrett finally said goodnight and went to his room, Sylvia sat for a while longer in the dark living room, with her phone still face down on the mattress beside her. Then she picked it up, opened the email, read it one more time, and after a long time, she typed, I'll call Thursday. S. She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she lay down on the pull-out couch in a stranger's apartment that didn't feel like a stranger's apartment anymore. And for the first time in a very long time, she closed her eyes without running the numbers first. She just let it go dark. And she slept. Thursday came faster than Garrett expected and slower than Sylvia needed. The days between had settled into something that none of them had named, because naming it would have required acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would have required deciding what to do about it. So instead, they just lived in it, the 3 of them moving around each other in apartment 312, with the careful, practiced ease of people who had quietly negotiated their space without ever sitting down to negotiate. Wren had recovered fully by Tuesday, which meant she was back at school and the apartment returned to its daytime quiet. Garrett went back to Dunmore Hardware on Wednesday. Sylvia stayed. She made calls, sent emails, sat at the window with her laptop open, and worked through whatever it was she was working through with the focused, close-to-the-chest concentration of someone who had learned not to announce their plans until they were already in motion. He didn't ask. She didn't offer. But he noticed things. He noticed that the stack of legal papers she'd been carrying in the bag on the back of her chair had started to come out onto the coffee table, organized into groups that meant something to her. He noticed that she was on the phone more, not the strained, resigned calls of someone navigating bureaucracy, but something with more edge to it, more precision. He noticed that she ate more on Wednesday than she had on Monday, which probably said something about what the calls were producing. He didn't say any of that either. Thursday morning, she was dressed and ready before he was up. Dark blazer over a gray shirt. Hair pulled back properly this time. She had her phone in her lap and a folder on top of that, and she was going over something when he came out of the bedroom. He stopped. "You look different," he said. "I have an appointment," she said, not looking up. "I know, but—" He tried to find the right word. "You look like someone who used to run a company." She did look up then. Something moved through her face, complicated, layered, and then she said, "That's the idea," and went back to the folder. He made coffee. He made toast. He put a plate within reach without saying anything, and she ate half of it without looking at it, and that was enough. The intake appointment at St. Catherine's was at 10. Garrett had offered to drive her. She'd said no. He'd said it was no trouble. She'd said she'd take the bus. He'd said the bus on that route had a broken ramp 60% of the time. She'd said she'd call ahead. He'd said, and he'd paused before this one, "Sylvia, let me drive you." She had looked at him with that expression again, the one that lived between disbelief and gratitude. "Why?" she said. "Because I want to," he said. "That's all." She didn't say anything for a moment. "Okay," she said finally. "But I go in alone." "Of course." "I don't want you sitting in the waiting room." "I'll get coffee somewhere." "And don't—" She stopped, closed the folder. "Don't look at me like I need backup. I've been walking into rooms alone my whole life. This is just walking." "I know," he said. "Good." "Sylvia." "What?" "You're going to be fine in there." She looked at him. "I know that," she said. But the way she said it, the specific emphasis, the slightly too fast delivery, told him that she hadn't been entirely sure of it until he said it out loud. The drive was quiet. He took the long route without telling her, the one that went along the river, because he'd noticed she always looked at the window when there was something to look at. And the river in January had a particular stark quality that seemed like the kind of thing she might appreciate. She didn't comment on the route, but she watched the river the whole way. He dropped her at the Sive entrance. Accessible, he'd checked. Actually checked on the city's disability services website the night before, and confirmed the ramp had been inspected 6 weeks ago. And she went in without looking back. He got coffee 3 blocks away. He sat in the truck. He didn't read his phone. He just sat. She came out 57 minutes later. He was back at the curb before she'd cleared the door. He watched her come down the ramp, and he could read the appointment in the way she was sitting, the set of her shoulders, the pace of the wheels, the particular way she was holding her jaw. She got to the truck. She reached for the door. "There's a 2-week wait," she said, before she was even fully inside. "Not 3. Somebody moved out early. The unit is ground floor, roll-in shower. It's good. It's actually good." She pulled the door closed. "I can move in on the 22nd. "That's 9 days, Garrett said. "Yeah," he nodded. He put the truck in drive. "Good," he said. And he meant it. He genuinely meant it. So he didn't understand, quite, why something in him also went quiet when she said it. They were halfway back to the apartment when she said, "There was a call." He glanced at her. "When I was in with the intake coordinator, Marcus called." She had her phone in her hand, but wasn't looking at it. "He left a voicemail." "What did he say?" "I haven't listened yet." She paused. "I don't know. I wanted to get through the appointment first." "Makes sense." "I knew if I listened to it before, I'd spend the whole meeting thinking about it instead of paying attention." Also makes sense. She looked at the phone. "I'm going to listen to it now," she said. Can I?" "It's your phone," he said. "You don't have to ask." She put it on speaker. The voicemail was 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Garrett kept his eyes on the road and listened. Marcus's voice was the voice of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say and then said something different. He started with the apology again. More specific this time, more concrete, naming the meeting, naming the vote, naming the particular way he had turned his face away from her when the count was read. He said he'd been telling himself for 14 months that he did it because the company needed stability, because the board had been pushing for it long before the accident, and the accident had just accelerated the timeline, because he genuinely believed that a leadership transition was in the best interest of the 47 people whose jobs depended on the company staying operational. Then he said, "But I think I did it because I was scared. Because watching you in that chair, and I know how this is going to sound, watching you in that chair made me realize that the accident could have been me. I was on that site 10 times that year. It could have been me on the ground. And I think I looked at you and I saw something I couldn't handle looking at. And I made a decision that had nothing to do with what was right, and everything to do with what was easier. And I am sorry, Sylvia. I am genuinely, fully sorry. Not because the company is struggling, which it is, because you deserved better. You deserved better from me, specifically." A pause on the recording. A breath. The Seattle partnership fell through in September. We lost 2 of the patents in the licensing dispute, which, you saw that coming. You told the board exactly how that would go, and they didn't listen. We've got maybe 8 months of runway left. And Hendricks... A pause. Hendricks is talking about a sale. Not a merger, a sale. He's got a buyer lined up, and the buyer isn't in construction tech. They just want the IP. And that means, Sylvia, everything you built, everything you actually built, it's going to get taken apart and sold for components. Another breath. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I don't know what I expect you to do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe you're somewhere good, and you've moved on, and this is just noise. He stopped. But I thought you should know. Because it's yours. It was always yours. And I'm sorry I let them tell you otherwise. The voicemail ended. The truck was quiet except for the road. Garrett didn't say anything. He pulled up to a red light and sat at it, and he could feel Sylvia beside him, doing the thing she did when something had gotten past her defenses. That absolute stillness. The kind that isn't calm, but is the closest thing to calm she could manage while everything below the surface was moving. 8 months of runway, she said. Yeah. Hendricks has a buyer. I heard. He's going to sell the patents. Her voice was level. Too level. The kind of level you have to work to maintain. 3 patents, 7 years of development. The adaptive scaffolding system, the modular foundation tech, She stopped. Do you know what those systems could do? Not for profit, not for a company, for actual sites, for actual workers who get injured every single year, because the equipment that exists doesn't account for the variables that... She stopped again. Her hands were flat on her thighs. Sylvia. His voice was quiet. I'm okay, she said. I know. I know, he said. The light turned green. She was quiet for 2 blocks. Then she said, He's right, Marcus, about the board. I told them the licensing structure they wanted to use on the second patent was going to create an exposure gap that any competitor could walk through with a decent legal team. I told them in writing. I put it in a memo. And they smiled and said they appreciated my input, and then did the opposite. She paused. 4 months after I left, the competitor walked through the gap. Lawsuit settled out of court. I found out from a Google alert. You were still tracking it, Garrett said. Of course I was tracking it. She said it like this was obvious. It was mine. He pulled into the parking lot beside the building and cut the engine. Neither of them moved. What are you thinking? He said. She turned and looked at him fully, not the sideways look, not the window look, directly. Her face was doing something he hadn't seen yet. Not the careful management, not the exhausted defense. Something raw, something that had been down under all of it for a long time and was now, reluctantly, near the surface. I'm thinking I built something good, she said. And it's about to be destroyed by people who never understood what it was for in the first place. And? She looked at him. And I don't know if I have anything left to stop it. He held that for a second. He didn't rush to fill it. One thing he'd learned in 3 years of being a single father: the worst thing you can do when someone tells you the truth is immediately hand them a solution. Sometimes the truth needs a few seconds to just be true before you start trying to fix it. But you want to, he said. She looked out the windshield. I want to, she said. They went upstairs. Wren was home by 3:30, deposited by the school bus and let in by Mrs. Alcott from downstairs, who had taken to collecting her with the cheerful territorial instinct of a woman who had decided that Wren was her project. Wren arrived already talking about a boy in her class who had brought a frog in his backpack, about the frog's subsequent escape, about the class's divided response to the escape, about the eventual capture of the frog, about the philosophical question of whether the frog had wanted to escape or had simply seen an opportunity. Sylvia listened to all of this from her position at the coffee table, where she had, at some point in the last hour, covered the table in organized stacks of papers, handwritten notes, and what appeared to be a rudimentary financial model sketched on the back of a St. Catherine's intake form. Wren looked at the table. Are you working? She said. Trying to, Sylvia said. On what? My company. Wren absorbed this. I thought you didn't have a company anymore. I don't, Sylvia said. That's the problem. Wren looked at the papers. She looked at Sylvia. She pulled herself up onto the couch with the gravity of a person about to offer the professional assessment. My dad says problems are just puzzles that are being dramatic, she said. Sylvia blinked. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Garrett was pretending not to have heard this. Did he? She said. He said it to me when I couldn't figure out fractions. I cried for like a really long time. And then I did the fractions. And? I still hate fractions, Wren shrugged. But I can do them. Sylvia looked at her for a moment. Then she looked at the papers. Something shifted in her face. A small, quiet shift, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Yeah, she said. Okay. Garrett came to the doorway with a dish towel over his shoulder. He looked at Sylvia. He looked at the table. He looked at Wren, who was now apparently studying the financial model with the earnest incomprehension of a child who wanted to be helpful. You want help? He said, to Sylvia. She looked up. I don't know what kind of help there is, she said. Tell me what you need, he said. Not what you think I can give you. What you actually need. She held his gaze. The question sat in the room. I need to know if Marcus would move, she said. Her voice was careful, but direct. If I had something to move toward. If there was a viable reason to pull him out. She paused. And I need to know if a company that's been restructured without its founder, gutted, essentially, can be rebuilt from the remaining patents alone. If you could get them back. Can you get them back? If Hendricks sells to an outside buyer, no. If I can get to the board before the sale closes, she stopped. The majority clause in my original operating agreement gives any founding shareholder 30 days to contest a sale under certain conditions. If the conditions are met, she picked up one of the papers. I never signed away my founding stake. They pushed me out of leadership. They couldn't touch the equity without triggering the clause. Do they know that? Hendrix's attorney knows it, she said, which means Hendrix knows it, which means the timeline on the sale is not random. He's trying to close before I... She stopped. Before you what? Before I have the resources to contest it. She put the paper down, which, 3 days ago, I didn't. Garrett looked at her. And now? He said. She looked at the table, at the papers, at the notes and the numbers and the financial models sketched on the back of the intake form. Now I'm sitting in an apartment that I didn't expect to be sitting in, she said, with 9 days before I have to leave, and a voicemail from a man who might be the best engineer I've ever worked with, and an operating agreement clause that nobody bothered to actually void. She paused. The question is whether any of that adds up to anything. Wren, who had been following this with the focused attention of a child who doesn't understand the words, but absolutely understands the stakes, raised her hand. They both looked at her. I think it does, Wren said. Sylvia looked at Wren for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. I'm going to call Marcus, she said. Not to Garrett, not to Wren, to herself. The way you say something when you're committing to it, putting it outside yourself so you can't take it back. Garrett pulled Wren off the couch with one arm before she could offer any further financial analysis. Come on, he said. You're making dinner with me. I can't cook, Wren said. That makes 2 of us. We'll figure it out. He didn't look back at Sylvia. He heard her voice start behind him as he reached the kitchen. Low, controlled, purposeful. The voice of someone who had just remembered something important about themselves. And he let the kitchen noise cover it. And he handed Wren a wooden spoon. And he started on dinner. And in the living room, for the first time in 14 months, Sylvia Crane was not making a call to navigate a system, or find a bed for the night, or manage the particular logistics of surviving inside a life that had been reduced to logistics. She was making a call with something to say. The call with Marcus lasted 2 hours and 19 minutes. Garrett knew this because he had checked the time when Sylvia's voice started in the living room, and he checked it again when it stopped. And in between, he had made pasta with Wren, badly, then acceptably, eaten dinner, done the dishes alone because Wren had fallen asleep on the couch mid-argument about whether spaghetti counted as a vegetable, and read 4 chapters of a book he couldn't remember the plot of. He'd been listening too hard in the wrong direction. When Sylvia came into the kitchen doorway, it was almost 8:30. He looked at her face and tried to read it the way he'd gotten good at reading it. The jaw, the eyes, the particular position of her shoulders. What he saw was something he hadn't seen before. Not the careful management, not the compressed determination. Something looser. Something that had been wrung through something and come out the other side, changed. Well, he said. He's in, she said. Garrett put down the dish towel. In how? He'll testify to the board misrepresentation. The memo I sent. The licensing warning. He kept a copy. His personal files, not the company's server. They can't claim it doesn't exist. She moved into the kitchen. Her voice was measured, but there was a current running under it. Something live. And he has 3 other employees. Not current. They left after the restructuring. They'll sign declarations, documenting the decisions made after I was removed. The ones I warned about in writing. Sylvia, that's significant. It's a start, she said, but the corner of her mouth moved in that way it did. It's a real start. He leaned against the counter. "How was it?" he said, talking to him. She was quiet for a moment. "Hard," she said. "He cried. At the end. Which I did not expect." She paused. "I didn't cry." "I know. I'm not saying it like it's a point of pride. I think I used up whatever I had for crying about crane dynamics a long time ago. I'm past the part where I cry about it. Now I'm at the part where I do something about it." "What's the next step?" She looked at him directly. "I need an attorney," she said, "to review the operating agreement and confirm the founding shareholder clause is still viable. If it is, and I believe it is, because Hendricks is a lot of things, but he's not stupid enough to avoid it quietly without my knowledge. That would have required my signature. Then we file a contest notice to block the sale. It buys time. It forces the board back to the table." She paused. "And if I'm at that table, Garrett, I know how to work that table." "I believe you," he said. "The problem is the attorney." She looked at the counter. "A good corporate attorney, one who can move fast enough to matter, is not cheap. And my last attorney—" She stopped. A beat of something. "My last attorney was retained by the company, not by me personally. So the moment I left, so did the legal representation." "How much are we talking?" "Retainer to review and file? Minimum 3,000. More likely 5. He was quiet. "I have some savings," he said. She looked at him so fast it was almost a flinch. "No," she said. "Sylvia, absolutely not." Her voice had gone to that register she used when something was non-negotiable. "I am not taking money from you, Garrett. I am already sleeping on your couch and eating your food, and I am not—" "It's not charity," he said. "I'm talking about a loan. With terms. You want to talk business? We can talk business." "You work at a hardware store." "I'm aware of where I work, thank you." "A retainer is $5,000. You can't—" "I've got 4 and change in savings," he said, "which is most of my savings, yes. But I also know what that operating agreement clause means if it holds. You get back to that table, Sylvia, and you've got leverage. Real leverage. What's that worth?" "That is not the point." "What's it worth?" She looked at him. "The remaining equity stake, if the company sells at its current valuation, is roughly $80,000, she said quietly. "If I can force a delay and negotiate instead of litigate, potentially more. If I can get back operational control, which is a longer road, significantly more." She paused. "But that's a very large if." "Okay," he said. "Garrett." "Okay, Sylvia, so it's a risk." He shrugged. "I've made riskier bets." "On what?" "On—" He stopped. "Ren," he said, more quietly. "When Dana left, I had nothing. I had a daughter, a lease I couldn't afford alone, and a job that wasn't going to cut it. And I bet on myself. I bet that if I worked hard enough and held on long enough, it would come together." He paused. "It has. Mostly." "That's different." "How?" "Because she's yours," Sylvia said. The word came out differently than she intended. Rawr. "She's your daughter. That's not a bet. That's a given. You bet on her because you know her. You know what she's made of." She stopped. "You don't know me." The apartment was quiet. Ren breathed softly from the couch. "I've been watching you for 6 days," Garrett said. "I watched you eat half a piece of toast and spend the rest of the morning on the phone, working through a housing system that's stacked against you, and not once complain about it. I watched you listen to my daughter tell you about the complete history of refrigerator magnets and make her feel like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever said. I watched you get an email from someone who betrayed you and spend the night figuring out whether you had anything worth salvaging instead of just deciding you didn't." He held her gaze. I think I have a pretty good idea what you're made of. Sylvia looked at him. Her hands were still on the wheels of her chair. Everything else was very still. And if the clause doesn't hold? She said. Her voice was quiet. If the attorney reviews it and it's void? If Hendricks already closed the sale and we're too late? Then you're out the attorney fees, I'm out the loan, and we're both exactly where we were before. Which is not nothing, because you've got Marcus, and you've got the documentation, and you've got your reputation back, even if you don't get the company back. He paused. Some things are worth doing, even if they don't work out. She looked at him for a long, long time. You're either the most genuine person I've ever met, she said, or you're very, very good at seeming like it. I'm not that complicated, Sylvia, he said. What you see is what's there. She exhaled slowly through her nose. If I take this, she said, it's a loan, in writing, with interest. You don't have to, in writing, she said again, with terms. If I won't take charity from a stranger, I won't take it from... She stopped, caught herself on the word. From a friend, he said. A beat. From a friend, she said. He nodded. Deal, he said. He held out his hand. She looked at it. Then she reached out and shook it, and her grip was firm and deliberate, the grip of someone who had closed a lot of deals and meant every one of them. The next morning, Sylvia called an attorney named Patricia Osei, who came recommended by a contact she'd kept from the Portland days, a woman who had represented 3 tech founders in disputes with their own boards and had a reputation for moving fast and billing honestly. Patricia answered on the second ring, listened to the summary without interrupting, asked 4 very specific questions, and said she could have a preliminary review of the operating agreement done within 48 hours, if Sylvia could get her the documents by end of day. Garrett drove Sylvia to the UPS store to print and scan the documents she'd had forwarded to her email. He sat in the truck while she went in. She came back 7 minutes later with the scan confirmation and the expression of a person who had just done something that could not be undone, and was entirely at peace with that. It's done, she said. Good, he said. He started the truck. I want to pay for the printing, she said. Sylvia, it was $4.60. I understand the amount. Then let me pay for it. He looked at her. She looked back. He understood, finally, what the argument was actually about. It wasn't $4.60. It was the principle of being a person who paid for things, of being someone who contributed to her own life. After 14 months of navigating a world that had organized itself around her limitations, around what she couldn't do and where she couldn't go and what she couldn't afford, $4.60 was a way of saying, I am still here. I am still participating. Okay, he said. She paid. He drove. Patricia called on day 2, which was earlier than expected, and Garrett was at work when it happened. He got the text from Sylvia at 2:17 p.m. It was 4 words. Clause is still valid. He put his phone in his pocket and went back to sorting drill bits, and the entire rest of the afternoon felt different. When he got home that evening, the apartment was different. Not physically. It looked the same. Wren's drawings on the table, the crooked bookshelf, the magnets on the refrigerator. But the air in it was different. There was something kinetic happening, something that had been static for 6 days and was now in motion. Sylvia was on the phone when he came in. He raised his eyebrows. She held up one finger, 1 minute, and kept talking. Her voice was the one he recognized from the 3rd day, the one that was precise and had authority in it. The CEO voice. No, I understand the timeline, but a contest notice filed under Section 9.4 supersedes the buyer's letter of intent. That's standard language, Patricia. If Hendricks contests the filing, We counter with the Marcus documentation and we go to discovery, at which point, yes, exactly. A pause. Monday is fine. I'll have everything to you by Sunday night. She paused again. Thank you, Patricia. She ended the call. She looked at Garrett. We file Monday, she said. Monday, he said. Patricia thinks the discovery angle alone will make Hendricks nervous enough to delay the sale. He's got his own exposure from the board decisions after I left, the ones that violated the operating procedures I'd established.
If that goes into discovery, a lot of things come out that he doesn't want coming out. She paused. He's going to want to settle.
And if he settles?
Depends on the terms. At minimum, I want the patents protected. I want the adaptive scaffolding system and the modular foundation tech ring-fenced from any outside sale. They can have the rest if they want it. She paused. But I want those patents.
Because of what they do, Garrett said, not a question. She looked at him. Because of what they could do, she corrected. If they land with the right people. If someone is actually using them for what they were designed for, instead of licensing them to a holding company in Delaware that's just going to sit on them. She looked at her hands. People get hurt on construction sites every single day, Garrett. Not because the work is inherently dangerous. All work has risk. But because the equipment hasn't caught up. Because the systems that exist were designed for a specific kind of body, doing work a specific kind of way. And anyone outside that template is working around the margins. She paused. That's what Crane Dynamics was supposed to fix. That's why I built it. Not for the patents, not for the equity, for the margin people. He was quiet for a moment. Tell me about the adaptive scaffolding, he said. She looked at him. You don't have to. I work in hardware, he said. I've had customers who do site work. I know what the equipment conversation looks like. Tell me about it. Something shifted in her face. He had offered her something she hadn't been offered in a long time. Genuine, practical interest. Not sympathy, not inspiration. Just, tell me how it works. She told him. She talked for 40 minutes.
About the modular locking system that could be configured by a two-person team without heavy machinery. About the weight distribution calibrations. About the sensor array that monitored stress points in real time. About the pilot program on 3 sites in Oregon that had produced a 62% reduction in structural-related incidents over 18 months. She talked and her hands moved. For the first time since he'd known her hands moved while she talked, tracing shapes in the air, demonstrating angles, illustrating forces. The CEO voice was still there, but underneath it was something else now. The voice of someone talking about work they loved. Wren had come out of her bedroom at some point and sat cross-legged on the floor and was listening with her chin in her hands, following none of the technical content and all of the energy. When Sylvia finally stopped, she seemed to realize for the first time that she'd been going for 40 minutes. A flicker of something crossed her face. Vulnerability, maybe. The aftermath of having let something show. Sorry, she said. Don't, Garrett said. She looked at him. Don't apologize for that, he said. Wren nodded firmly from the floor. It was really interesting, she said. I don't know what scaffolding is, but I liked hearing about it. Sylvia looked at Wren for a moment. It's the structure that holds people up while they build something, Sylvia said. Wren thought about this. Like training wheels? She said. Sylvia blinked. Kind of, she said. Yeah, kind of exactly like that. Friday came. Saturday. The papers to Patricia went out Sunday night, as promised. Sylvia at the kitchen table with her laptop open until 11. Garrett at the other end of the table pretending to read and mostly watching without appearing to watch. And Wren asleep in the bedroom. At 10:40, Sylvia hit send on the email to Patricia. She sat back. She looked at the ceiling. "I need you to know something," she said, without looking down. Garrett waited. "When you found me at that bus stop," she said, "I had made a decision." She said it carefully, like each word needed to be placed exactly right. I wasn't going to do anything drastic. I want to be clear about that. But I had decided that the system was going to win. That I had fought as long as I could fight, and there was nothing left to fight with. And the reasonable, logical, adult thing to do was to accept that and start figuring out how to live inside that. She paused. I had decided I was finished. Garrett was very still. "And then you stopped," she said. She looked down from the ceiling. She looked at the laptop. She looked at the email confirmation. "And you didn't tell me it was going to be okay. You didn't tell me I was strong. You didn't give me a speech. You just—" She stopped. Something in her throat worked. "You just made sure I was warm." The apartment was quiet. "That's all it took?" he said. His voice was rough at the edges. "That's all it took," she said. "That's how far down I was. Someone made sure I was warm, and it changed the whole math." He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't reduce it. "I'm going to get those patents back," she said. It wasn't a prediction. It was a declaration. "And I'm going to find the right people to use them. And when I do," she paused, "I'm going to do it right this time. Not just building something that works, building something that holds." "You'll do it," he said. "You don't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I know you, and that's close enough." She looked at him across the kitchen table. 9 days ago," she said, "you were a stranger." 9 days ago," he said, "so were you." She held his gaze. The thing behind her eyes, the calculating, exhausted, constantly scanning thing, was still there, but it was quieter now, like a security system that had finally, reluctantly, acknowledged that the building was not under threat tonight. "I moved to St. Catharines on the 22nd, she said. "Thursday." "I know." "That's 3 days." "I know." A pause. "I don't—" She stopped, started again. "I'm not good at this, at whatever this is. I spent the last 14 months becoming very efficient at not needing people. And I think I was good at it. I think I got very good at it." She paused. "And then I met your daughter, and she told me problems are just dramatic puzzles. And you loaned me your savings without asking for anything back, and I—" She stopped. "Sylvia," he said, "I'm trying to say something." "I know. Take your time." She looked at him. "I don't want to disappear," she said. "From this. From you and Ren. After Thursday." She said it straight, the way she said things when they mattered. No cushion, no qualification. "I know that's a strange thing to say to someone you've known for 9 days. I know the whole situation is— I know how it looks. I know—" "Sylvia." "What?" "I don't want you to disappear either," he said, simply. No ceremony, just the truth, placed on the table between the laptop and the coffee mugs. She looked at him. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Ren's voice came from the bedroom, groggy and indignant. "Dad, can you guys talk quieter? I'm trying to sleep." They both looked at the bedroom door. Then they looked at each other. And this time, the thing that crossed Sylvia's face was not almost a smile. It was a real one, full and unguarded, caught off guard by the ordinary miracle of a child complaining about noise, the specific proof of a life being lived with other people in it. It changed her whole face. It reached her eyes. Garrett smiled too. "Sorry, Bug," he called. "Go to bed," Ren called back. "Working on it." Sylvia closed the laptop. She looked at the closed bedroom door. She looked at the stack of papers on the table. She looked at the coffee mug in her hands. "I have 3 more days," she said. 3 more days, he agreed. She looked at him one more time. "I'm going to use them well," she said. He picked up his mug. "I know you are," he said. And somehow, sitting at a scratched kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, in a modest apartment that the city had not designed for her, with a lawsuit to file in the morning and a room to vacate on Thursday, and 47 former employees scattered to the wind, and a company that was still, technically, in the process of being taken from her, Sylvia Crane felt, for the first time in 14 months, like a person who was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because the hard part was over, but because for the first time in a long time, she was facing the hard part from the right direction. Monday came in cold and clear, the kind of January morning that had no apologies in it. Garrett was up at 5:30. He made coffee, stood at the kitchen window, and thought about all the things that were in motion now that couldn't be stopped. The filing that Patricia was submitting to the court by 10 a.m. The declaration Marcus had signed and scanned and sent at midnight. The 3 former Crane Dynamics employees whose written statements were now part of a formal legal record. Things that had been in Sylvia's head for 14 months were now in the world. Paper and signatures and court stamps. Real. Irreversible. He heard the wheels on the floor. "You're up early," Sylvia said. "Couldn't sleep." "Me either." He poured her a mug and passed it without ceremony. She took it and they stood. She in the kitchen doorway, he at the window, in the particular quiet of 2 people who have shared a small space long enough to be comfortable inside the same silence. "Patricia files at 10, Sylvia said. "I know." "After that, it's out of my hands until Hendricks responds." "How long will that take?" "Patricia thinks 48 hours. He'll want to call his attorney will review the clause, and then they'll realize they're not going to close the sale before we contest it. At that point," she paused, "he either fights or he folds. And fighting means discovery. And discovery means everything the board did after my removal goes on the record." She held the mug with both hands. "Hendricks is a businessman first. He doesn't like exposure." "So he folds." "He negotiates," she corrected. "There's a difference. He'll come to the table with conditions. He always has conditions." She paused. "So do I." Garrett looked at her. In the early morning light, with her hair down and a plain gray shirt and the coffee mug held in both hands, she looked different from the woman he'd loaded a wheelchair into the back of his truck 11 days ago. Not softer, that wasn't the right word. More grounded. Like something that had been displaced had found its level again. "Are you ready for this?" he said. She thought about it. Not the automatic yes, the real consideration. "I've been ready for this for 14 months, she said. "I just didn't have the ground to stand on." At 10:03, Patricia sent a confirmation email. Filed. Sylvia read it at the kitchen table, laptop open. Wren eating cereal beside her, and narrating a dream she'd had about a horse that could do math. Garrett watched Sylvia read the confirmation. She read it twice. She closed the laptop carefully, like it contained something fragile. She picked up her coffee. She drank it. "Done," she said. Wren looked up from her cereal. "What's done?" "Something I should have done a long time ago," Sylvia said. Wren considered this with the philosophical patience of a child who would learn that adult answers were often like that. "Okay," she said, and went back to the cereal. Garrett reached across the table and put his hand over Sylvia's for just a moment. 1 second. 2. She didn't pull away. Tuesday passed in the specific agony of waiting. Sylvia worked. She had a legal pad now. Garrett had bought her one, dropped it on the coffee table without comment, and she had used it to fill 4 pages by noon.
And she was building something. Not just the legal case, something beyond it. He could see it taking shape in the way she organized her notes, the way she was cross-referencing old documents with new ones, the way she occasionally stopped and stared at the middle distance with the focused, interior look of someone assembling a structure that only existed in their head so far. He didn't interrupt it. He brought food within reach and let her work. Wednesday, Ren came home from school and immediately sensed the atmosphere of the apartment, the way kids do, through some animal instinct that had nothing to do with words, and was quieter than usual. She sat near Sylvia while she worked, not talking, just drawing. Her crayon drawings had changed slightly over the 11 days. They still featured horses and dogs, and one recurring character, who wore a cape and had red hair, that was clearly meant to be Ren herself. But there was a new figure in several of them now. A figure in a wheelchair, always drawn next to the caped, red-haired girl. Always given the same careful attention that Ren gave to details she considered important. Garrett saw the drawings but didn't mention them. Some things didn't need to be pointed out. Wednesday evening at 7:44, Sylvia's phone rang. Patricia. She took it in the living room. Garrett stayed in the kitchen. He washed the same bowl twice. He heard Sylvia's voice, controlled, precise, asking short questions and listening long. He heard the specific register shift that happened when something changed, the barely perceptible intake of breath, followed by a longer, more deliberate exhale. He heard her say, "Tell him I want a meeting. In person. Friday." A pause. "I know where the offices are, Patricia. I built them." Another pause. "Tell him I'll be there at 9. She came into the kitchen. Her face was doing the thing where everything was held very still, and the only indicator of what was happening underneath was the brightness in her eyes. The particular brightness of a person who has been handed something they'd stopped expecting. "He wants to negotiate," she said. "Of course he does," Garrett said. "He's trying to reframe it as a mutual restructuring. Patricia says his attorney used the phrase collaborative transition of founding assets approximately 4 times in the conversation." She paused. "Which means he's scared." "Scared is good." "Scared is useful," she corrected. "It means the terms I want are achievable." She took a breath. "He wants a meeting Friday. Patricia already pushed for the Crane Dynamics conference room. His attorney said no. We compromised on Patricia's office." "Neutral ground," Garrett said. "Slightly more than neutral," Sylvia said. "Patricia has a conference table. I know how to work a conference table." He looked at her. "You're going to be good in that room," he said. "I know," she said. Not arrogance, just the specific confidence of someone taking accurate stock of their own abilities after a long period of being told those abilities didn't matter. She was moving to St. Catharines the next day, Thursday. He had been aware of it all week, the way you're aware of weather coming, not dreading it exactly, but feeling its approach in a low, background frequency that he couldn't entirely ignore. Thursday morning, Ren refused to go to school. "I'm sick," she announced, appearing at breakfast in her uniform with her arms crossed. Garrett looked at her. "You're not sick." "I feel sick." "Your temperature is normal. You ate a full bowl of cereal. You are not sick." "I feel emotionally sick." Garrett pressed his lips together. He looked at Sylvia, who was drinking her coffee and very carefully not looking at either of them. The specific expression of a person who is staying out of a parenting decision and finding it difficult. "Ren," he said. "She's leaving today," Ren said. Her voice had dropped. The performance had gone out of it. "She's leaving today, and I don't want to be at school when it happens." The kitchen went quiet. Sylvia put her mug down. "Hey," she said. Ren looked at her. "You know St. Catharines is 6 blocks from here." Ren stared at her. 6 blocks, Sylvia said. I know because I've been on that bus route. It's not far. That's not the same as here, Wren said. No, Sylvia agreed.
It's not, but it's 6 blocks, and I'm going to need someone to tell me what's worth going to on the bus route between here and there. Someone who knows this neighborhood and has opinions about things. Wren looked at her carefully. I have a lot of opinions, Wren said. I know, Sylvia said. I've been observing. A pause. You'll come back? Wren said. I'll come back, Sylvia said. And when I do, we'll take the bus together, and you can show me everything I need to know. Wren looked at her for a long moment, with the earnest, undefended intensity of a child deciding whether to believe something. She decided. Okay, she said. I'll go to school. She went to school. Garrett helped Sylvia load her things into the truck. There wasn't much. The bag from the back of her chair, the laptop, the legal pad, the folders. The sum total of everything she'd had when she arrived, plus the legal pad. He loaded it without saying anything unnecessary, and she let him without saying anything unnecessary. And that was its own kind of language now. The drive to St. Catherine's was quiet. Not the uncomfortable quiet of strangers, but the settled quiet of people who didn't need to fill the air between them. He took the river route again. She watched the river again. He pulled up to the accessible entrance. Ground level, ramp freshly painted, exactly as the website had promised. She looked at it for a moment. Good ramp, he said. Good ramp, she agreed. He helped carry her things in. She allowed this without argument, which told him something about how far they'd come in 11 days. And the unit was what Patricia had said. Ground floor, roll-in shower, a window that looked out onto a small courtyard. Modest, clean, functional. Hers. She moved through it slowly when they were alone in it, running her hand along the counter, checking the clearances, opening and closing the bathroom door. He stood by the window and let her do it. This was something she needed to do alone. The first pass through a space that was going to be hers, the physical act of claiming it. It works, she said finally. Yeah, he said. She stopped in the middle of the room. She looked at him. 11 days, she said. 11 days, he confirmed. I filed a legal contest, recovered 2 witnesses and 3 declarations, found an attorney, established viable grounds to recover my founding patents, and scheduled a board negotiation for tomorrow morning. She paused. 11 days ago, I was at a bus stop deciding I was finished. You were never finished, he said. You were just cold. She looked at him for a long moment. The calculating thing was still there. It would probably always be there. It was part of how she was built. But it was quiet. Really quiet. The security system at rest. I need to tell you something, she said. He waited. When I get those patents back, she stopped. Started again, more carefully. When I get those patents back, I'm not going to rebuild Crane Dynamics. Not the way it was. She looked at the window. I spent 7 years building something for a market, for investors, for a board that was always going to own more of it than I did, the moment it got big enough to matter. She paused. I'm going to build a nonprofit, a foundation. The technology, the adaptive scaffolding, the modular systems. I want it open source. I want it accessible. Not for licensing fees, for sites that can't afford what the big contractors use. For workers who are one bad day on the wrong equipment away from... She stopped. Away from where you are, he said quietly. Away from where I was, she said. From where I was before this. She looked at him. There's a difference now. He understood what she meant. Where she was before this wasn't the accident. It wasn't the chair. It was the bus stop, the decision, the cold. It's a good idea, he said. The foundation.
It'll take time, she said. I'll need to find funding. I'll need people. Marcus, if he'll come. Others. She paused. It's going to be hard. Most good things are. She smiled at him. The real smile, the full one. It still surprised him every time. The way it changed her whole face, reached her eyes, undid all the careful management in a single second. You're going to be insufferably supportive about everything, aren't you? She said. Probably, he said. Fair warning. She shook her head slowly, but the smile didn't go away. He left her there. He drove back to the apartment, which felt different now. Not empty exactly, because Garrett's apartments never felt empty when Wren was in them, but different, adjusted, like a room that has held something for a while and still carries the shape of it after the thing is gone. He stood at the window for a minute. Then he picked up his phone. He texted, "How's the ramp?" Her reply came in under a minute. "Still good. Stop asking about the ramp." He put the phone down. He felt something that was not sadness and not happiness, but the specific feeling of a thing having resolved correctly. Not perfectly, not without cost, not without the weight of everything it took to get here, but correctly. The right outcome from an unlikely series of events. He'd learned in 43 years of living that those didn't happen by accident. They happened because someone stopped when they didn't have to. Friday morning, Sylvia went into Patricia's conference room at 9 a.m. wearing the dark blazer and the look that Garrett had first noticed on Thursday of the previous week. The look of someone who used to run a company and remembered how. Hendricks came with 2 attorneys. Sylvia came with Patricia and the legal pad. The meeting lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. Garrett was at Dunmore Hardware, sorting lumber inventory in the back and checking his phone with a regularity that Steve would have had something to say about if he'd been paying attention. He got a text at 11 that said, "He's stalling." He got one at 12:17 that said, "Patricia is magnificent." He got nothing for 90 minutes after that, which told its own story. At 2:08, his phone rang. He picked up on the first ring. "Well," he said. "The patents are protected," Sylvia said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it that she wasn't entirely suppressing. Something vibrating just below the surface. The adaptive scaffolding system, the modular foundation tech, both ring-fenced from any outside sale. In writing. Signed. He exhaled, long and slow. "The equity?" he said. "We negotiated a buyout. Not full value." He pushed back hard on the number. "But enough." She paused. "Enough to fund the first phase of the foundation. Enough to retain Marcus. Enough to start." "Sylvia." "I know," she said, and the vibration broke through just slightly on those 2 words. Just enough. "I know." He sat down on a stack of lumber. Steve was going to say something about that, too. "You did it," he said. "Patricia did a significant portion of it," she said. "You did it," he said again. A silence. "We have a name," she said. "For the foundation. Marcus suggested it." She paused. "Scaffold. Just scaffold. No dynamics, no tech, no corporate suffix. Just the thing that holds people up while they build." He thought about Wren on the living room floor. "Like training wheels?" And Sylvia. "Kind of, yeah, kind of exactly like that." "It's perfect," he said. "I thought so." He stood up from the lumber. He was smiling, and he was aware of smiling, and for once, he didn't do anything to contain it. "Come for dinner tonight," he said. A pause. "I don't want to impose." "Wren will never forgive either of us if you don't come for dinner tonight," he said.
And she has a very long memory. I've seen it in action. A moment. "What are you making?" she said. "I have no idea." "Garrett." "I'll figure it out," he said. "I always figure it out." She was quiet for a second. When she spoke again, the control was still there, but the thing underneath it was fully audible now. Warm, present, real. "Okay," she said. "I'll come." He was halfway to the store by the time he got off the phone. He bought pasta, not rotini this time, actual linguine, because the occasion seemed to require it, and a jar of proper sauce, and garlic bread, and a small chocolate cake from the bakery section that Wren would lose her mind over. He drove home, made dinner, and had it on the table by 6:15. Wren got home at 6. She dropped her backpack at the door, 3 feet from the hook, a conversation they were never going to stop having, and said, "Is Sylvia coming?" before she'd even fully gotten her jacket off. "She's coming," Garrett said. Wren did the thing that could only be described as a victory rotation and went to change out of her uniform. Sylvia knocked at 6:30. Garrett opened the door and she was in the blazer still, but her hair was down, and she had the legal pad under her arm and the look on her face of someone who has come through something and knows it and is still slightly stunned by the knowing. She looked at him. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. Wren appeared from the hallway like she'd been waiting for a starting gun, which she probably had, and said, "You came back!" with the full volume joy of a child who had trusted something and been proven right. Which was, Garrett thought, the specific best feeling in the world. "I said I would," Sylvia said. "I know, but sometimes people say things," Wren said, with the pragmatic wisdom of a child who had learned this particular lesson earlier than she should have. And Sylvia's face did something complicated for just a moment, before she reached out and pulled Wren into a one-armed hug that was fierce and quick and clearly surprised them both. Wren hugged back with both arms. No hesitation, no negotiation, just the complete, uncalculating trust of an 8-year-old who had already made her decision about this person and was not interested in revisiting it. Garrett stood in his own doorway and watched and didn't say a word. They ate linguine at the kitchen table. Garrett overcooked it by 2 minutes, which Wren documented with considerable satisfaction. "Dad, it's mushy!" And Sylvia ate 2 full helpings and said nothing about the texture, which told him everything. Wren talked about school, about the frog situation having apparently developed new dimensions, about a project she was doing on rivers, about how she had explained scaffolding to her friend Delilah, and Delilah had said it sounded like a jungle gym for buildings, which Wren considered to be a fairly accurate description. Sylvia laughed at the jungle gym line. Not the almost laugh, not the controlled movement of the corner of her mouth. A real laugh, full and sudden, the kind that catches you off guard and gets out before you can decide whether to let it. Garrett thought he'd remember it for a long time. After dinner, after the chocolate cake, which produced exactly the reaction he'd anticipated, and after Wren had been extracted from the table and installed in her bedroom with a book she wasn't going to read, Garrett and Sylvia sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and the quiet that they had over 11 days and a few days more made their own. Sylvia put the legal pad on the table between them. The first page was the financial model sketched on the intake form. Behind it, 4 pages of notes from the last week. Behind that, a new page. On it, in her precise handwriting, Scaffold Foundation, Phase 1. Below it, a list of names. Marcus was first. Below his name, 7 others. Below the names, 3 bullet points that he didn't read because they were hers and not for him yet, unless she chose to make them so. She turned the pad toward him. "I want to show you something," she said. He read it. He read it slowly, the way it deserved. The the scope, the partners she'd already thought of. The sites she'd identified in 3 states where the adaptive system could be piloted within 6 months. The funding structure: lean, foundation model, grant eligible, sustainable without a board that could vote her out. He read to the end of the page. He looked up. "This is real," he said. "It's real," she said. 6 months to first pilot. If the funding application goes well. Patricia has contacts at 2 construction industry foundations that have been trying to find exactly this kind of applied safety technology. She paused. "I know how to write a grant application. I've written 12. "Of course you have," he said. She looked at him. "I want to put your name in it," she said. He looked up. "Not officially," she said quickly. "Not legally. You're not... I'm not trying to make this something it isn't. But in the acknowledgments, in the narrative section where they ask how the project originated." She paused. "Because it did originate somewhere. It originated at a bus stop on Leonard and 5th at midnight in January, when a man who had every reason to keep walking stopped anyway." She held his gaze. "I want that in the record. I want that to exist somewhere in writing, that it mattered, that it changed things." He looked at her for a long time. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Put it in." She looked at him with that expression, the last version of it, the one that had started as something between disbelief and gratitude, and had, over 11 days, and a negotiation, and a foundation, and a real laugh at a kitchen table, become something else. Something that didn't have a clean name, but that both of them understood. 6 blocks, she said. 6 blocks, he said. "I'll need someone to give me the neighborhood," she said. "Wren will have opinions. She already told me about 2 coffee places and a park with a good ramp." "Of course she did." A pause. "Garrett?" she said. "Yeah, thank you." She said it the way she said things that mattered. Straight. No cushion. Not just for the couch. Not just for the money. For... She paused. For stopping. For just... stopping. He looked at her. "You would have found your way back," he said. "Maybe," she said, "but not from here. Not in this direction." He picked up his coffee mug. She picked up hers. They held them without drinking for a moment, in the way that people do when they're marking something without quite having the language for it. "Here's the thing about scaffolding," Garrett said. She looked at him. "It doesn't do the building," he said. "It just makes sure the people doing the building have somewhere to stand." He paused. "That's all I did. You did the building." Sylvia looked at him. She looked at the legal pad. She looked at the window, the dark city outside it. The life she was going to go build 6 blocks away, that was going to be harder and better and more fully hers than anything she'd had before it. She looked at the man across the table, who had stopped at a bus stop when he didn't have to, who had made coffee without being asked, and loans without conditions, who had sat up until 1 in the morning without requiring anything in return, who had learned her face in 11 days well enough to see what she was trying not to show, and had the grace never to make a point of it. She looked at all of it. And Sylvia Crane, who had been a CEO and then nothing, and was now, slowly, something new, lifted her coffee mug. "To scaffolding," she said. Garrett raised his. "To scaffolding," he said. And in apartment 312, on the 3rd floor of a building on Leonard Street, in the middle of a January that had started as the worst month of her life and ended as the one that changed everything, 2 people who had been strangers for 11 days and would never be strangers again drank their coffee, and the city moved outside the window, and somewhere 6 blocks away,
A room was waiting for her. And somewhere in the future, a foundation was waiting for the world. And the only thing left to do was get up in the morning and begin. Which is, in the end, all that any of us can do. And sometimes, it is everything.